As of April 1, 2022, there were 2,414 death row inmates in the United States. The number of death row inmates changes frequently with new convictions, appellate decisions overturning conviction or sentence alone, commutations, or deaths. Due to this fluctuation as well as lag and inconsistencies in inmate reporting procedures across jurisdictions, the information in this article may present inaccuracies. History. Dr. Dre years, first generation. In 1986, N.W.A.'s Dr. Dre signed to Eazy-E's Ruthless Records. As head of production at the label, Dr. Dre produced a large number of Ruthless projects, many of them successful. Feeling the pressures of having to produce so many acts and feeling he was underpaid, Dr. Dre became frustrated with Ruthless. After the departure of Ice Cube in 1989 over financial disagreements with Jerry Heller, Suge Knight and the DOC went over the books with a lawyer. Convinced that Jerry Heller and Eazy-E were dishonest, they approached Dr. Dre about forming a label with them. Away from Heller and Eazy-E allegedly using strong-arm tactics, Suge Knight was able to procure contracts from Eazy-E for the DOC, Dr. Dre, and Michelle L.E. Drive. Dre and Suge Knight along with partners the DOC and Dick Griffey began the process of starting a record label and music partnership in anticipation of Dr. Dre's departure from Ruthless. Although the name of their new music venture was originally called Future Shock, the DOC claimed to have suggested changing the name of the new label to Death Row, but rights to the name were already owned by the unknown DJ, who also happened to be one of Dre's former music associates in the 1980s. Unknown stated in an interview that he created the name Death Row for a potential deal to start another record label under Morgan Creek. However, he later sold the naming rights to Dr. Dre and his partners in July 1991, and by 1992 the name changed to its eventual title of Death Row Records. Knight approached Michael Harrio Harris, a businessman imprisoned on drug and attempted murder charges. Through David Kenner, an attorney handling Harris's appeal, Harrio set up Godfather Entertainment, a parent company for the newly christened Death Row. Knight approached Vanilla Ice, using management connections with Mario Chocolate Johnson, claiming Johnson had produced and co-written the song Ice Ice Baby, and had not received royalties for it. After consulting with Alex Roberts, Knight and two bodyguards arrived at the Palm in West Hollywood, Los Angeles, California, where Van Winkle was eating. After shoving Van Winkle's bodyguards aside, Knight sat down in front of Van Winkle, staring at him before asking "How you doin'?" Similar incidents were repeated on several occasions, including alleged attempts to lure Vanilla Ice into a van filled with Bloods and Crips, before Knight showed up at Vanilla Ice's hotel suite on the 15th floor of the Bel H Hotel, accompanied by Johnson and a member of the Los Angeles Raiders. According to Vanilla Ice, Knight took him out on the balcony by himself, and implied he would throw Vanilla Ice off unless he signed the rights to the song over to Knight. Van Winkle's money helped fund Death Row. Death Row was initially located at the intersection of Westwood Boulevard and Wilshire Boulevard, later to be relocated to the intersection of Wilshire Boulevard and San Vicente Boulevard. The Chronic / I. None. Doggy Style / I. None. Death Row Thanksgiving. On November 22, 1994, at the offices of the Brotherhood Crusade in Los Angeles, Suge Knight and several artists from Death Row such as THA Dog Pound as well as DJ Quick distributed nearly 2,000 turkeys to the public. Death Row also donated turkeys the following year as well. Signing to PAC, Bad Boy Records feud and Dr. Dre's departure. After an August visit to C2PAC at Clinton Correctional Facility in northern New York State, Suge traveled southward to New York City to join Death Row's entourage to the second annual Source Awards ceremony. Already reputed for strong-arm tactics on the Los Angeles rap scene, Suge used his brief stage time mainly to disparage Sean Puff Daddy Combs, boss of Bad Boy Entertainment, the label then leading New York rap scene. Knight criticized Combs for his habit of ad-libbing on his artists' music as well as making numerous cameo appearances in his artists' music videos. Before closing with a brief comment of support for Shakur, Shuj invited artists seeking the spotlight for themselves to join Death Row. Eventually, Puff recalled that to preempt severe retaliation from his Bad Boy crew, he had promptly confronted Shuj, whose reply that he had meant Jermaine Dupri, of So Def Recordings, in Atlanta was politic enough to de-escalate the conflict. Still, among the fans, the previously diffuse rivalry between America's two mainstream rap scenes had instantly flared already. And while in New York, Shuj visited Uptown Records, where Puff, under its founder Andre Harrell, had started in the music business through an internship. Apparently without paying Uptown, Shuj obtained the releases of Puff's prime Uptown recruits Jodeci, its producer Devante Swing, and Mary J. Blige, all then signing with Shuj's management company. On September 24, 1995, at a party for Jermaine Dupri's birthday in Atlanta at the Platinum House nightclub, Bad Boy Records' entourage entered a heated dispute with Shuj and Shuj's friend J. Hassan Jamal Big Jake Robles, a Bloods gang member and Death Row bodyguard. According to eyewitnesses, including a Fulton County sheriff, working there as a nightclub bouncer, Puff had heatedly disputed with Shuj inside the club, whereas several minutes later, outside the club, it was Puff's childhood friend and own bodyguard, Anthony Wolf Jones, who aimed a gun at Big Jake, who was fatally shot while entering a limousine. The attorneys of Puff and his bodyguard both denied any involvement by their clients, while Puff's lawyer added that Puff had not even been with his bodyguard that night. Over 20 years later, the case remains officially unresolved. Yet immediately and persistently, Shuj blamed Puff, cementing the enmity between the two bosses, whose two record labels dominated the rap genre's two mainstream centers. In October 1995, Knight visited 2PAC in prison again and posted $1.4 million bond. 2PAC began work on his Death Row album, kicking off his tenure by insulting the Notorious B.I.G., Junior Mafia, and Puff Daddy, whom he accused of setting him up to be robbed and shot at Quad Studios on November 30, 1994, as well as Mobb Deep, Jay-Z, A Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, Jimmy Henchman, The Fugees, and Nas. Tha Dog Pound's debut album, Dog Food, continued the label's streak of commercial successes. Its members rappers Corrupt and Daz Dillinger then joined Snoop in ridiculing New York rappers with their single New York, New York, featuring Snoop Dogg. The video, set in New York City, New York, was also heightened when the set was fired upon in a drive-by. After the shooting, Snoop Dogg and Tha Dog Pound filmed scenes kicking down a building in New York. The single provoked a response called L.A. by East Coast rappers Capone and Noriega, Tragedy Kadif, and Mobb Deep. Another report was that Sam Snead was beaten in one of the label's meetings by a group of Death Row affiliates, led by Shuj Knight and 2PAC. According to Daz Dillinger, the reason this happened was that Sam Snead had too many East Coast rappers in his Lady Heroin music video. Disillusioned with the direction of Death Row, artists RBX and the DOC chose to leave, after which Shuj Knight exercised tighter control over the rest of the roster. Dog Food was not produced by Dr. Dre but was mixed by Dr. Dre, a further testament to Dre's dwindling involvement with Death Row. Dr. Dre also grew tired of Knight's violence within the label, although he contributed toward 2 tracks on Tupac's All Eyes on Me. The rest of the tracks on the album, however, were mostly produced by Daz Dillinger and Johnny J, despite Dr. Dre being nominally titled as executive producer. Tupac's behavior reportedly became erratic as he continued his verbal wars with the Notorious B.I.G., Bad Boy Records, Puff Daddy, Mobb Deep, and Prodigy, including many violent confrontations with many of those rappers at some points. On March 22, 1996, due to the infighting, Dr. Dre officially left Death Row Records to found Aftermath, which provoked 2PAC to turn against Dr. Dre. MC Hammer's involvement and departure. Suge Knight's relationship with MC Hammer dates back to 1988. With the success of Hammer's 1994 album, The Funky Headhunter, Hammer signed with Death Row in 1995, along with his close friend, Tupac. The label did not release the album of MC Hammer's music, although he did release versions of some tracks on his next album. However, Hammer did record tracks with Shakur and others, most notably the song Too Late Playa. After the death of Tupac in 1996, MC Hammer left the label. Tupac Shakur's murder and Suge Knight's incarceration. Formerly a united front of artists, Death Row's roster fractured into separate camps. Dawes, now head producer, worked on Snoop Dogg's second album Tha Dog Father, which featured Bad Az and Technique of his LBC crew, Warren G. and Nate Dogg of his group 213 and Tha Dog Pound. 2PAC shut himself into the studio with Hurt Mbat and Big D, crafting the Don Killuminati, the 7-Day Theory. Unlike All Eyes on Me, it was devoid of high-profile Death Row guest appearances, instead showcasing the Outlaws and Bad Az, and had a much darker tone. Suge Knight was now barely reachable by his staff, and employees were assaulted as punishment for not following orders. During a trip to Las Vegas, Nevada, for a Mike Tyson boxing match, 2PAC was interviewed on the possibility of Death Row East, an East Coast branch of Death Row. It was also during this time that Alex Roberts and David Kenner had been seen at Suge Knight's Vegas Club 662, in discussion about the possibility of having Roberts' New York underworld connections help pave the way for Death Row East. Though names from Big Daddy Kane and the Wu-Tang Clan to Eric B. and Craig Mack were mentioned, the label never formed. On September 7, 1996, Suge Knight and 2PAC were caught on surveillance camera at the MGM Grand Hotel in Las Vegas attacking gang member Orlando Anderson, who was a member of the Southside Compton Crips Street Gang. Later that night, 2PAC was shot 4 times in a drive-by shooting in the front seat of Suge Knight's BMW 750IL waiting at a red traffic light at Crossroads, en route to Knight's Las Vegas Club 662. Despite living 6 days in critical condition, 2PAC died on September 13, 1996. He was 25 years old. Tupac's The Don Killuminati, 7-Day Theory was released in November 1996, just 1 week before Snoop Dogg's Tha Dog Father. Both albums achieved multi-platinum sales. On February 28, 1997, Suge Knight was convicted of parole violation and sentenced to 9 years in prison, causing Interscope to drop their distribution deal with the label. Suge Knight's control over the label diminished, as Nate Dogg was able to leave, followed by Snoop Dogg and Corrupt. After the release of her solo album Necessary Roughness, the Lady of Rage left. Daz Dillinger departed in 1999 after the release of his debut album Retaliation, Revenge, and Get Back, but produced for Big C Style, and he later formed Dog Pound Records. Corrupt returned to the label in early 2002 upon Suge Knight's release from prison on August 6, 2001. Death Row Records UK. In 2001, Knight decided to enter the UK market with Death Row Records operating as an independent record label in conjunction with the Ritz Music Group, a company known for its success with Irish country music artists such as Daniel O'Donnell. The joint venture signed British R&B singer Mark Morrison to a 5-year deal with Death Row Records UK, with a single called Thank God It's Friday and an album called Innocent Man scheduled for a 2002 release. However, the single did not chart in the UK and the album ended up being released by footballer Kevin Campbell's record label Too Wicked, before being reissued in 2006 by Mona Records. Second generation exodus. Maintaining artistic control from behind bars, Suge Knight launched smear campaigns against his former artists, most notably Snoop Dogg. Death threats were exchanged, and Snoop Dogg responded by publicly dissing Suge Knight, leaving the label, and later releasing a diss track named Pimp Slap D, critically acclaimed by music magazine Complex. The label supported itself with releases pulled from vaults, most successfully various posthumous 2PAC albums, along with Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg re-releases and then unreleased compilation records such as Suge Knight Represents, Chronic 2000. He signed new talent, including Crooked I, who had been lighting up the Californian underground with his rhyming ability, particularly The Wake Up Show with Sway and King Tech. Despite bad blood, Corrupt would again sign with Suge Knight in exchange for the position of vice president, which sparked a feud between himself and Daz Dillinger and Snoop Dogg. He began work on Against THA Grain. His verbal feud with his former partners continued from 2002 to 2005. Left Eye, member of the R&B girl group TLC, signed with Death Row after finishing her solo deal with Arista, who released her first album Supernova in 2001. At this time, Death Row changed into THA Row Records. Lopes joined to record a second solo album under the pseudonym NINA, while also working on TLC's new album 3D. NINA was cancelled after her death in April 2002. The album was leaked online in 2011. After promoting his new talent from prison, directing a campaign against his former artists and exacerbating the conflict between Daz Dillinger, Snoop Dogg, and Corrupt, Suge had still yet to release any albums by his new artists. After Corrupt's second departure, Against THA Grain was released. Soon after, citing dissatisfaction with serving 5 years on the label and seeing no release, rapper Crooked I left Death Row, eventually filing a gag order on Knight to prevent him from interfering with him finding a new deal. P.D. Pablo, who had signed in 2005 and started the never-released album Same Eyes on Me, left along with rapper THA Realist in 2006. Bankruptcy. On April 4, 2006, both Death Row Records and Suge Knight simultaneously filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection following the appointment of a receiver to acquire and auction off assets of both Death Row Records and Suge Knight in the civil case filed by Lydia Harris against Suge Knight. Among those listed as unsecured creditors to Death Row include the Harris's, the Internal Revenue Service, Cook Records, Interscope Records, and a number of artists previously signed to the label. Suge Knight eventually lost control of Death Row Records and his personal assets when Chapter 11 trustees took over both cases. Ownership changes. Widiwake Entertainment Group was created in 2006 by Laura Lavie. On January 15, 2009, Death Row Records was successfully auctioned to entertainment development company Widiwake for $18 million. Widiwake Entertainment made a leveraged purchase of Death Row Records in part thanks to financing provided by New Solutions Financial Corporation. On January 25, 2009, an auction was held for everything found in Death Row's office after it filed for bankruptcy. Both Widiwake and New Solutions Financial were based in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. New Solutions by the end of 2009 began to squeeze Laura Lavie out of Widiwake Entertainment by restricting her ability to access funds they had lent her for Death Row. By November 2009, Laura Lavie was removed from Widiwake Entertainment and Robert Thompson of New Solution Financial had taken over day-to-day operations. Lavie then sued her former company, Ontario-based Widiwake Entertainment Group, New Solutions Financial Corporation and New Solutions Managing Director Robert Thompson in New York County Court on November 19, 2009. New Solutions Financial Corporation was eventually exposed as a Ponzi scheme. Of note was the death row electric chair, which went for US $2,500. Since the acquisition, the company has continued to release material from its vast archives of materials acquired in the sale. Noteworthy releases include previously unreleased material from such artists as Snoop Dogg, Corrupt, Danny Boy, Crooked I, Sam Snead, LBC Crew and OFTB. Since the acquisition of the material, Death Row, under the management of Wiki, has made many positive steps towards improving the image of Death Row by making good on its promise to make royalty payments to many of the artists, producers, and songwriters with commercially released material under the label. On Record Store Day, April 18, 2012, the label issued a free Death Row Record Store Day CD sampler which included music from P.D. Pablo and Danny Boy. The Chronic Relit was released on September 1, 2009. The album contained the Chronic remastered with 7 bonus songs from the vault by Snoop Doggy Dogg, CPO, Corrupt, Jewel, plus a DVD containing music videos, a Dr. Dre interview, a Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg mini-movie, and 1992 television commercials for the original The Chronic release. Snoop Doggy Dogg Death Row The Lost Sessions Vol. 1 was released October 13, 2009 and contains 15 previously unreleased tracks, with 4 being produced by Dr. Dre. Death Row The Ultimate Collection was released on November 24 and was a special box set containing 3 audio CDs, 1 DVD of music videos which includes the unreleased Dr. Dre music video Puffin' on Blunts and a limited edition Death Row t-shirt. The set boasts over 20 unreleased tracks by Snoop Doggy Dogg, THA Dog Pound, The Lady of Rage, Lord Autops, and P.D. Pablo. During this period, there was a distribution venture between Entertainment One, Wiki, and Death Row. On December 10, 2012, New Solutions Financial Corp., the Canadian company that owned Wiki Death Row, had gone bankrupt and sold both the label and catalog to a publicly held company. In 2013, Entertainment One purchased the rights to the Death Row catalog. The group invested £175 million in content rights and television programs in the year and £4.2 million to purchase the music library assets of Death Row. Death Row had a pop-up event in Los Angeles on April 10, 2019. On August 23, 2019, American toy company Hasbro announced a $4 billion purchase of E1, making them the owners of Death Row Records. In April 2021, Hasbro and Entertainment One announced it would sell off E1 Music to the Blackstone Group. The acquisition was completed in June 2021. Revival through Snoop Dogg and Third Generation. On February 9, 2022, ahead of the release of his next album and his appearance in the Super Bowl LVI halftime show, Snoop Dogg announced that he would acquire the rights to the Death Row Records trademarks from MNRK Music Group. The sale did not immediately include rights to the label's catalog, but it was reported that he was nearing a deal to acquire the catalogs of himself and other Death Row artists from MNRK. On February 11, 2022, Snoop Dogg released his third studio album on Death Row Records, marking a 26-year lapse from the label. Snoop Dogg's purchase of Death Row Records did not include the rights to Tupac or Dr. Dre's albums originally. On March 4, 2022, in an interview with Tidal, Snoop Dogg stated he acquired the rights to all the albums previously released on Death Row Records, including his debut studio album Doggy Style and Dr. Dre's The Chronic. Despite the interview, Dr. Dre's lawyer, Howard King, later refuted the false reports 2 days later, stating the rapper still retains total control of The Chronic. On April 18, 2022, it was announced that Death Row Records would have its own streaming service, which pays higher royalties to its artists than main music streaming services. Notable artists. Current artists. Former artists. Discography. See also: Death Row Records artists. From Compton to Long Beach.